Prologue. Whether wrongly or rightly, I was called the Source by the higher sentient beings who sought after my power and insights into the universe like moths to the fire. I dwelled at the edge of the universe in silence until those misguided beings came for me. I imprisoned them in a wall of ice as a warning to others, still no one heeded. Some time ago, a phenomenon took place in the universe that caught me off guard. The phenomenon drew near again and I took the opportunity to study it, to see if I could influence it for my purposes. Chapter 1. The DC Universe, Justice League Headquarters. My name was Thanos. I craved neither power nor dominance, only her love. The more she shunned me, the greater were my feats to win her attention, for death was a hard woman to please. Now in a few moments, she will have nowhere to run or hide from me, as she will be forever in my presence. The Justice League headquarters was a space station that orbited the version of Earth that existed in this reality. The watchtower, as the space station was called, was needle-shaped with a ring at the top. For all its technological sophistication, it looked like a toy in my opinion. My destination was the section called the Hall of Justice that was essentially the command center of the space station. A carefully laid plan had influenced the older god called Metron to meet with the Justice League to warn them of the impending merger of their reality and one that I came from. Metron was the bait to attract the two Justice League members I wanted. I was not disappointed when I teleported into the Hall of Justice. My targets, Batman and Wonder Woman, were there. The two were alongside Superman, Green Lantern, the Manhunter, and the Flash. A minor use of my telekinesis was all that was necessary to chain these beings. I telepathically invaded the minds of Batman and Wonder and made them unconscious. Then I teleported my prey to the source wall. "Thanos," said Metron while he moved around in his levitated intergalactic vehicle called the Mobius chair. He was a slender being with an aged, wise face. Normally he preferred to be an observer of events in the cosmos, but he was fooled into taking action on this occasion. "The realities are merging once more and it must be stopped. Whatever scheme you have with Batman and Wonder Woman must take a back seat," said Metron. "Actually, the merger of the realities is a part of my plan," I said. Unbeknownst to Metron was that I drained the cosmic element X that powered the Mobius chair into my skin. He tried to teleport after my revelation, but the chair was too depleted to respond. In a nanosecond, I was up to Metron, and in another split second, my right fist hammered into the being, knocking the chair onto the floor. I showed no mercy to Metron as I swiftly dropped harder punches on his torso until the older god bled. "Your knowledge of the anti-life equation is also needed," I whispered to him. Then he and I teleported out of the watchtower. Chapter 2. The Marvel Universe, Wakanda's airspace. I feared my father Yuga Khan and hated my mother Hegra. Still I thanked them for the invocation in me for conquest and domination of every sentient creature in all of the universes. My birth name was Uxas, that later changed to Darkseid when I killed my brother Drax and took his birthright, the Omega Force. My stony appearance was due to the Omega Force's transformation of my body. At first, I thought that it was a cruel curse, but I saw the fear that the appearance invoked in my enemies and came to appreciate it. As my ship drew nearer to Wakanda, it was bombarded by electromagnetic pulses, cyclones, and blasted by an array of weapons. The poor fools were unaware that my vessel traveled through the very hearts of suns. The ship's computer warned of a breach in the shields and then the main hull of the ship. Before I could ask for a specification of the intruders, the ceiling was pierced and a man and a woman leapt into the bridge. The man wore a black uniform with an almost feline-shaped mask. He was muscular and 6 feet tall. He carried a sword that had an energy blade. I saw 2 gold seals on the hilt of the sword. The woman was 5 feet 9 inches tall. Her hair was lily white, much like her eyes were. She hovered in the air next to the man. Her black and gold uniform shimmered from the lightning that was wrapped around her hands. The couple was my target and I made no hesitation in my next move. I fired the Omega beams from my eyes. The twin scarlet beams latched onto the Black Panther. My second beams were aimed at Storm. To ensure a swift end to the confrontation, I fired several more Omega beams. The Black Panther blocked the beams with his sword, but his weapon disappeared when it made contact with my powers. The follow-up beams raced into the Black Panther and he used his agility to evade them. However, my Omega beams are like heat-seeking missiles, they will follow you to the end. In no time at all, several of the Omega beams caught the Black Panther and he disappeared in a cloud of ash. Storm suffered the same fate as she flew away and tried to use plasma energy on the beams. She even fired a burst of energy at me. I didn't feel the impact. My Omega beams snaked around her until she was trapped and caught. Her body burnt into ash. I ordered the ship to halt the descent and to teleport back to the source wall. Chapter 3 Darkseid. I fought Thanos when we had first met in what seems like centuries ago. We were evenly matched then as we were today. I admired Thanos's bloodlust and the unbridled extremities that he will go to win. He was a being who leveled entire dimensions and broke great creatures at his feet. One commonality between us was that we murdered our mothers. I killed my mother because she took the life of my only love. Thanos slew his mother in a fit of madness. Just as Thanos had longed for death, I have searched endlessly for the truth behind the anti-life equation. The equation was the mathematical proof that existence served no purpose. A rational sentient being became despondent and pliable once the anti-life equation was accepted into their psyche. That made it easier for me to dominate their life. My enemies found a way to nullify the anti-life equation, so I must create a new one. Batman, Black Panther, Storm, and Wonder Woman were the keys needed to unlock the new equation. My Omega beams had transferred the Black Panther and Storm to the source wall. The source wall was on the very edge of the universe in my reality. My father and many others were obsessed with the great power that lied behind the wall, the source. And like my father, everyone who tried to break through the wall ended up being captured by it and trapped in ice. The victims were in the thousands and the sight of them astonished even me at first. Imagine in the blackness of space, a wall of bodies and ships that stretched out on the horizon. From a distance the wall doesn't appear that thick. When you got there, then it became a different matter. Bodies that ranged from a mile long to giants like my father were plastered one on top each other. Their faces were swollen in eternal pain. In between the mountainous bodies were gaps which Thanos and I used. A measure of atmosphere and gravity had been produced over the centuries. The source wall was the only thing that remained unchanged during the last amalgamation. Also, the source was where the anti-life equation came from if the legends were true. From the source wall, Thanos and I could monitor and influence the amalgamation process as it began. I met Thanos in the heart of the wall. He possessed a regal presence since he was also a king. He wore the blue and gold uniform of his class. The body was chiseled from hardened hand-to-hand combat. By a twist of fate, our camp was at the feet of my father Yuga Khan. He was frozen in his giant form. Two long horns came out of his helmet, the face was captured in scene of a battle cry, the eyes were like the blackest of nights. Thanos caught me as I gazed briefly at my father. "Why don't you free him?" asked Thanos. Thanos would have never said that if he witnessed the power of my father. Only my father and I have broken free from the source wall based on our strength. And my father was far stronger than I was. "He will be a hindrance," I said. "Do I hear a hint of concern in your voice?" asked Thanos as he looked at Khan. "Hardly," I replied. "Like father like son," said Thanos. "What do you mean?" "He craved the source until it captured him. And you are obsessed with an equation that evolves into something new. You're right, I said. This is how life has played out. We try so hard to control the lives of others when we aren't even in control of our own, said Thanos. Pretending to be wise, I see. A momentary lapse, said Thanos. He never called me son, I said. I have 2 sons and I have a moderate feeling of love for them. I don't want children, said Thanos. What if death wants? I'll tell her no. Our love must only be directed to ourselves, replied Thanos. You don't know what you will miss out by not having children, I said. Darkseid, I am naturally evil. Imagine what my children will be like. Nonsense. My son Orion was the epitome of good and he fought against me. My brother Drax was a hero to the weak. You can never know how your children will turn out. Nonsense, said an adamant Thanos. All is ready, I said as I turned from my father. Thanos pointed to the bodies of Batman, Wonder Woman, and Metron that were dropped in a corner. Small breathing apparatuses were placed on the humans. I fired my Omega beams at the spot and the Black Panther and Storm were reconstructed in the area. Excellent, said Thanos. He went over to them and placed the breathing apparatuses on them. Then he rested his hands on their heads to restore the memories that he had stolen. Now we dissect Metron, I said. Thanos lifted the old god with a mental force and the body came between him and me. I found the Radiant on Batman as you expected, said Thanos. It was shaped into a blade. Radiant was the only element that could kill my species that were called new gods, of which Metron was a member. Thanos produced the blade over Metron and through telekinesis the old god was cut open. The life equation that was stored in Metron's body illuminated the dim surroundings as it emerged from the body. The equation contained abstract symbols that represented different aspects of the cosmos. I will return with the Tree of Reality, I said. I took Storm and Wonder Woman and teleport to Themyscira. In the meantime, Thanos would invade Black Panther's mind to retrieve his knowledge of shadow physics. With the Tree of Reality's power I would cement my position as ruler. Then I could test the new anti-life equation on Batman first because he stopped my last attempt to conquer reality. Chapter 4 Ororo had started the day with a workout in bed with T'Challa that made its way to various parts of their bedroom. It was the kind of vigorous loving making that brought out another side from you and your partner. The rest of the morning was spent in the crystal forest where she witnessed the birth of new species of crystallized flora. It was around 11 o'clock when she received a message from T'Challa that an alien spaceship had bypassed the S.W.O.R.D space station and was headed for Wakanda at a threatening speed. T'Challa teleported to her location and explained his plan to intercept the vessel. Presently, Ororo dreamt that she sank in the sea and then a childhood memory flashed in her eyes. Then she looked up and swam to the surface. The intimate memories increased as she neared the surface. She saw the sun and pushed harder to meet it. She broke through the surface and her mind was flooded by the memories that were lost to her. Ororo awoke to a cold chamber that was lit by a flambeau. She checked her body for injuries and looked around the chamber. Another woman was not too far away from her. She remembered the attack made by the alien and the transformation of T'Challa into ash. If I survived then he must have too, thought Ororo. She stood and went to the woman who had long black hair and wore skin-tight black pants and boots. Battle bracelets were on the woman's wrists and a tiara was on her forehead. When Ororo saw the face, disbelief and surprise became one. She knew the woman. Diana, said Ororo and shook her. Diana was slowly roused from her sleep. 2 blue eyes looked into Ororo's face. Sister, said Diana in a Greek accent. How? But that would mean it means that our worlds have joined once more, said Ororo. Diana flexed her fingers and her expression showed that something was wrong. "I don't have my gifts," said Diana while she stood. "It has been so long," said Ororo. "Tell me about it." "I was with the Justice League getting briefed on the merger of our realties when a strange foe appeared. His skin was purple, the eyes were like red lava and the chin had indentations like fissure vents in the hardness of his face. An image formed in Ororo's mind and a name came on her tongue. "Thanos," said Ororo. "You know him?" Ororo held her forehead as her last memory of Thanos appeared. He had telepathically entered her mind and then she lost consciousness. "He took away some of my memories," said Ororo, "which I now have back. He must have a reason for that." "Indeed," said Diana. "Why else would he?" Ororo looked at Diana. "What's the matter?" asked Ororo. "Look at the door," said Diana and she pointed. Ororo turned around at the door that she had mistaken for a wall earlier. The door was 20 feet high. A thick branched tree that was flanked by 2 ravens was carved on the door. "That's the doorway to the World Tree," said Ororo unconsciously. "I've never seen it before," said Diana. "The Amazons had shown it to me after I passed the ritual to become Wonder Woman in this reality," said Ororo. "What does the World Tree do?" "It can alter reality," replied Ororo. She faced Diana and continued, "Only I can open the door as Wonder Woman. Someone wants me to do it." "Then let's leave this place," said Diana. She grabbed the flambeau and sent the light around the chamber. A tunnel appeared. "There," said Diana. "That's our way out." Diana walked into the tunnel and Ororo followed. "I hate alternate realities," said Diana. "How have you been keeping since we last met?" asked Ororo. "It has been same the gods, war and more war, but I can't complain. How about you?" "A bit of the same as you and I'm married now," replied Ororo. Diana turned and hugged her. In that moment, Ororo was touched by the genuine connection and love that she had with Diana even though they were bonded in a fabricated world. "Congratulations! Who is the lucky guy?" "T'Challa the Black Panther." "What?" asked Diana stiffly. Her eyes widened as she searched Ororo's face. "I knew T'Challa from the last amalgamation. I worked for him." "Is there a problem?" "No. It's just I didn't expect to hear his name. I considered him a trusted friend," replied Diana. "What made you work for him?" asked Ororo as she continued down the tunnel. "After I left Themyscira I needed to gain better skills. I headed for Africa and found myself in Wakanda. I did some wet works for T'Challa." "So in your reality was he still a king?" asked Diana. "Yes," replied Ororo. "So we are both royalty," said Diana. "This is strange sharing the memories of an alternate life," said Ororo. "As I said before I hate these things but I've been messed up by them so much that it has become commonplace. Also why did Thanos take you if I was only needed to open the World Tree door?" asked Ororo. "Good question," said Diana. "Does Thanos have any weaknesses?" "None that I can think of," replied Ororo. "And Thanos did not take me. Then who did?" "The person had a stony appearance. Red beams came from eyes and they followed me until I was caught." "That sounds like Darkseid," said Diana, and then she cursed. "Thanos and Darkseid were one being during the last amalgamation. I fought them. They must have got back together. Then they must be monitoring us," said Ororo. "Definitely," said Diana. She raised the flambeau. A small door was at the end of the tunnel. "Do you remember this place?" asked Diana. Ororo held her forehead and reflected for a moment. "No," she replied. Then let's see where this leads to. Diana went to the door and pushed it. The door refused to move. Ororo saw the disappointment that slightly appeared on Diana's face as she realized her human frailty in the new reality. "Let me help," said Ororo. "You're the one with the Amazon gifts in this dispensation," said Diana. Ororo pushed on the door and it moved. A shining light slipped out from the other side. Ororo shoved the door aside and her eyes came upon the towering world tree. The tree was a body of light and its branches held up the ceiling. "This is impossible," said Diana. "We made a mistake," said Ororo. "No. You were simply tricked with an illusion like smoke and mirrors," said Darkseid as he appeared behind them. "Now I have no further use for you." The women turned around and saw the red eyes that came hauntingly out of the darkness. Ororo and Diana bolted out of the way as the Omega beam snaked out the body of stone. Ororo recognized the beams were more lethal than the previous ones. Her only recourse was to bring down the chamber. "I can't without taking Diana out first," muttered Ororo. She flew to the right to avoid the ribbons of Omega beams that followed her. Meanwhile, Diana backflipped to stay out of the beam's path. "Come to me, Diana," shouted Ororo. Ororo flew as fast as she could and she intercepted her sister. She headed upwards and felt the blast from the convergence of Omega beams. But there were more of the scarlet predators that shifted sideways and went up and down in their pursuit like hunting dogs. Ororo spotted Darkseid. His stony countenance seemed to be also psychological. Ororo was certain that he would not listen to her reasoning. Darkseid touched the world tree and it shuddered like a frightened child. Then Darkseid rose and he fired his Omega beams at the world tree. Apparently the Omega beams drew the power from the world tree and transferred it into Darkseid. "Ororo, look out!" shouted Diana as she clung onto Ororo's shoulder. Instinct made Ororo turn to her left and she saw the silent red killers as they closed for the strike. "I'm sorry, Diana," said Ororo. Ororo closed her eyes and concentrated on turning herself into a bomb that would destroy the chamber and stop Darkseid. Chapter 5. T'Challa was in the techno jungle inventing a gizmo that came to him through inspiration when he was notified that the alien vessel was headed for Wakanda. Agent Brand contacted him briefly and then he went to Ororo. Presently, T'Challa became semi-conscious after Thanos telepathically entered his mind and he felt a presence in his mind that moved freely around his innermost thoughts. "Who is there?" asked T'Challa. "Don't you remember?" asked Thanos. Instantly, T'Challa saw a vision of a flat spaceship as it took off and Thanos stood on a rocky terrain underneath the vessel. Then there was nothing except for darkness. "I remember," muttered T'Challa as more visions appeared that ranged from his childhood to adult life. "My memories are back, but how? When I made my deal with Raven I wondered why she wanted certain memories erased. I speculated that they were valuable and would be a handy bargaining chip if I encountered her again, so I kept them. Lucky for me, since your wife's and your memories are more valuable than anyone imagined," said Thanos. "Get out my head," said T'Challa. "But I have just begun. You possess the knowledge of a solution to a problem that I have. The field of science that you call shadow physics will help me deploy the anti-life equation during the amalgamation process." T'Challa had snippets of the alternate life that he had lived during the last amalgamation. "You remember it," said Thanos. "That's the reason I gave back your memories, so I will have the full power of your brain at my command." "Never," said T'Challa, and he tried to locate the unseen intruder. "Fool, I have already imprisoned your consciousness," said Thanos. T'Challa was now in a dream state. He saw his hands and legs. Then he realized that he was trapped in a box that rolled slowly forward. He pressed his hands and feet against the walls in a vain attempt to stall the motion. "Where is my wife?" asked T'Challa. "Darkseid took her." "She must be Ash by now," said Thanos. T'Challa muttered the name that was given. It was new to him. "It was Darkseid who took us?" asked T'Challa. "Yes," replied Thanos. "I will find a way to stop you," muttered T'Challa, and he focused his thoughts on freedom. He pushed the walls with all his strength until his muscles ached. Then it occurred to him that whatever happened in the mind affected the physical body. T'Challa looked at his right hand and balled it into a fist. Then he struck himself in the chest. His sight was covered by the wings of darkness and he no longer felt anything. "What have you done?" shouted Thanos. T'Challa had an out-of-body experience. His soul floated above his corpse. He saw that Thanos went over the body and tried to revive it. "Now is my chance," thought T'Challa. He flung himself into the body and kicked out of Thanos's reach. T'Challa broke out his claws from the gloves and he scampered up the nearest wall, which was actually a frozen body. T'Challa changed direction and he leapt onto another body. He nimbly climbed to the shoulder. Thanos flew behind him and fired a blast of energy. T'Challa narrowly missed the attack and he somersaulted onto the forehead of Yuga Khan. Thanos fired more rays of cosmic energy from his hands at T'Challa. The rays missed and struck Yuga Khan in the face. T'Challa leapt off and headed for the narrow spaces behind Khan. Suddenly the statue of Khan moved forward. T'Challa turned back and witnessed the reanimation of Yuga Khan. Ice transformed to flesh as Khan flayed his arms and walked forward. Then T'Challa's eyes caught a human body that was near Khan's feet. By reflex, T'Challa slipped down to the cape body. A bat symbol was on the chest of the body armor that the unconscious man wore. T'Challa placed the body on his shoulder and made to leave the presence of Khan and Thanos. "You over there stand before me," commanded Yuga Khan as he shrunk to an 8 feet tall being and faced Thanos. "You have come for the source. It is mine alone to have," said Khan in a monstrous tone. "I am not here for the source," said Thanos. "Liar, and for your forked tongue you shall perish," shouted Khan. T'Challa turned around to see the altercation. Khan and Thanos punched each other simultaneously. The speed and force of their attacks created a sonic boom and a sonic wave that shook the surroundings. T'Challa stumbled as shards of ice fell. A long silence gripped the source wall as T'Challa lost sight of the combatants. T'Challa took the time to look over the man next to him. The person wore a mask that had extended points like bat ears. "Batman," thought T'Challa. T'Challa touched the cape that was lightweight, yet apparently it was sturdy enough to glide with. A sound carried T'Challa's attention back to Khan and Thanos. But only one of the beings stood, and it was the horned figure of Khan. His ruby-red eyes gleamed horrifically. "You there," Khan called out to T'Challa. "Come and stand before me. Your friend has fallen." "Sword," shouted T'Challa. The weapon teleported into his hand from the place that Darkseid had placed it in the camp. The Dark Force energy blade emerged as the nano-robots peeled off into the hilt. "Who are you to call upon the leader of Wakanda?" shouted T'Challa. "I am Yuga Khan, King of Apocalypse." Khan stepped forward ominously. "I have never heard of Wakanda. Where is it, so I may bury them as I did their king?" T'Challa weighed his chances of winning a battle against a being that had bested Thanos, the obliterator of worlds, with one blow. "I shall not run nor will I hide," thought T'Challa. "It is I who will be sending your carcass to Apocalypse," roared T'Challa. A boom tube opened a few feet away and Darkseid exited it. "Father," said Darkseid, stunned. "Ungrateful uxes," said Khan. Father and son attacked each other. T'Challa relied on his hypervision because the beings moved so fast due to their god speed. Darkseid managed a punch to the left side of Khan's face that pushed the parent onto the back foot. Darkseid's Omega beams blazed out of his eyes at his father. Khan blocked the beams with his right hand and pushed them back into Darkseid's eyes. The father sent a sharp knee into Darkseid's gut and the upstart dropped slightly. Then Darkseid responded with a tackle that lifted both of them into air and they crashed through the last of bodies that hid the source. An explosion of pure white light forced T'Challa to close his eyes. When he reopened them, Darkseid and Yuga Khan had disappeared. The entire wall shook violent as though great hands had seized it. T'Challa saw that Thanos' body was shaken free and it floated out into space. "No," said T'Challa, since Thanos probably knew where Ororo was. T'Challa ran onto a jagged piece of the wall that extended out due to recent upheavals. From that vantage point, T'Challa shouted at Thanos. "Where is Ororo? Where is Storm?" It was in vain as Thanos spun uncontrollably into the blackness. T'Challa sensed someone behind him and the sliver of ice he stood on moved. He turned around and saw Batman. The cape covered both the front and back of the man's body. His broad shoulders and wide chest created an imposing figure. His eyes stared in judgment while his left foot was placed delicately on the ice that T'Challa stood on. Batman merely had to press harder on the ice for it break off from the wall and send T'Challa into oblivion. "Start talking," said Batman in a commanding and gruff tone. He pressed on the ice gently to drive home the point. Chapter 6 T'Challa sheathed the sword and he magnetized it to his back. Then he whispered coordinates to the computers. Instantly, he was teleported a few meters behind Batman. The Dark Knight reacted swiftly as he realized what had occurred and he leapt with a high kick into T'Challa. "Stop this foolishness," said T'Challa, as he parried the attack. Batman recoiled and he settled a short distance from T'Challa. "Well?" asked Batman in a demanding tone. "I'm T'Challa from planet Earth. My wife and I were taken by a person called Uxas or Darkseid. Thanos wanted me so that I could use my knowledge to administer something called the anti-life equation," said T'Challa. "First of all, I'm from Earth and I have never seen you before," said Batman. "I have never seen you before either," said T'Challa. "You must live under a rock then," said Batman. "You must be the one out of touch if you have never heard of me or my country Wakanda," said T'Challa. "There is no such country unless we are speaking about two different Earths," said Batman. "Then I must be in another dimension," said T'Challa. "Go figure since I've never seen Thanos before," said Batman. "What is this place?" asked T'Challa. "It's the Source Wall where deranged power seekers and adventurers who believe in the Source end up imprisoned. Have you heard of the amalgamation process? It is the merger of my reality with another from a different multiverse. It has happened before." T'Challa searched through his memories which gave him a deep satisfaction. "I recall such an incident. An alternate reality was created," said T'Challa. "It is occurring again. That's what Metron was explaining to me before Thanos appeared," said Batman and he pointed to the body of the old god. Batman went over to the body and examined it. "Who was he?" asked T'Challa. "A watcher of events. He decided to intervene this time," replied Batman. "We have to get back to my Earth and the Justice League." Batman went to the Mobius chair that was wedged into a gap of ice. The vehicle appeared to be dead. Batman fiddled with a few of the controls and got nothing out of the Mobius. Meanwhile, T'Challa searched around the area and then he saw Darkseid's ship. There was a wide gap between the ship and the Source Wall. "I found our way out," said T'Challa. Batman came down to him and he saw the ship. "Great. Now we just have to reach it," said Batman. "I can teleport us," said T'Challa. I'll get Metron and the Mobius chair. A few minutes later, they were on the bridge of the vessel, the last place T'Challa saw Ororo. As for Batman, T'Challa noticed that he always stood half a pace behind, which improved his reaction time to anything that T'Challa might do. "Do you know how to pilot this ship?" asked T'Challa. "I've had experiences with them," said Batman in a cold tone. He gave a code to the ship's computer and the vessel took off into hyperspace. The thing about amalgamation that doesn't make sense is that universes expand away from each other. "What drives our multiverses into one?" asked T'Challa. Metron explained that gatekeeper between the two multiverses had perished and that actually the multiverses are represented by two abstracts being called the Brothers. "The Brothers are the cause of the amalgamation," replied Batman. "We have to find and stop the Brothers." Chapter 7. Diana slapped Ororo gently on the face to wake her. Ororo came through and saw her sister's face and the overhead sun. "Where are we?" asked Ororo. "Topside," replied Diana. "You destroyed the chamber and protected us in an envelope of pressurized air." Ororo sat up. They were on a beach where the waves came peacefully into the shore. "Where is Darkseid?" asked Ororo. "I have not seen him or the World Tree. There is no one else on Themyscira. I thought that time in the sunshine would do you some good. As soon as you are ready, then we'll try to make contact with my friends in the Justice League, if they are still around," said Diana. "Then we can fix this mess. It is not all that bad. We've met each other," said Ororo. "True, sister, very true." Next story, Batman and Wonder Woman. Chapter 1. The scent of the dead god held T'Challa's hypersense of smell. Metron's mutilated body rested on his equally dead teleportation chair, the Mobius. The god's eyes were shut and his mouth partly closed. His arms were slung over the fat armrests of the grounded chair that once traveled through dimensions. Metron's skin was dark gray and wrinkled by age. T'Challa looked inside the body that had no organs, blood, or a skeleton. "The body is more like a shell," thought T'Challa. Batman moved behind him. T'Challa understood why. The Black Panther had broken the pregnant pause that started when he and Batman had left the Source Wall in Darkseid's confiscated spaceship. T'Challa knew that Batman was suspicious of him. T'Challa turned casually to the man. "What was inside of him?" asked T'Challa. "Haven't a clue," said Batman in a forced gruff voice. The effort that Batman placed to change his voice was one of the peculiarities that T'Challa picked up in his assessment of the stranger. It made T'Challa assume that the person under the hood and scowl was well known and his normal voice was recognizable. T'Challa made other assessments such as the very human nature of Batman. T'Challa didn't sense any superhuman enhancements, rather a peak human form. The eyes were fully alert and expectant. The body was ready to spring like a jackknife at any moment. Those were subtle observations that T'Challa made, as overall Batman seemed a calm, minimalistic person. The rectangular view screen showed the streaming lights of the passing stars. There was a short alarm from the ship's artificial intelligence computer that stated that they neared the Earth. The floor of the ship was smooth and polished. Soft white light bounced off the surface. A grim atmosphere held the wide bridge firmly. A single throne elevated from the floor. This was the bridge of a conqueror. A person seated in the high throne looked through the view screen at Conquest. Darkseid, the owner of the ship, had disappeared in the source. T'Challa reflected on his whereabouts. Then he remembered the equation that was mentioned to him. "Can you tell me more about the anti-life equation?" asked T'Challa. Batman shifted a bit. "Not much, other than from all accounts that only the surface has been scratched with regards to its origins and role," replied Batman. T'Challa folded his arms. "Who are the Justice League?" he asked. "As the name implies, it is a fellowship of upholders of the ideals of justice, equality, and freedom. It sounds like the Avengers from my reality, said T'Challa. Batman looked at him even more intently. Do you belong to that team? Asked Batman. On and off. So you know of Captain America and Doctor Strange? T'Challa was surprised when he heard the names. Yes, he replied. Funny. I didn't see you with the Avengers when I encountered them, said Batman. As I said, I'm on and off the team at times, said T'Challa. Ahem, muttered Batman. And how did you even meet the Avengers? I've crossed over to your multiverse before. T'Challa sensed a heightened tension between him and Batman. I'm not your enemy, said T'Challa. Ahem, said Batman lowly. He turned to the view screen. The ship suddenly dropped out of hyperspace and a space station appeared in front of it. The space station was rotund and large. Batman took a step forward. T'Challa guessed that something was wrong. The ship stated the space station had attempted to communication with it. Put it through, said Batman. The space station's uptight AI computer came on. Alien vessel, stop at once, state your objective and declare your cargo. What is the name of the space station? Asked Batman. This is S.W.O.R.D Tower, replied the space station. Are the Justice League on board? Asked Batman. No one by that name is on board. Please stop your ship and comply, else you shall be fired upon, said the space station. Is there anyone on board the station? Asked T'Challa, since he found it odd that a computer spoke instead of a person. No one is on board. This is your final warning, said the space station. Amalgamation must have begun, said Batman. Close the channel, he said to the ship's computer, and it complied. The vessel has shields that we should use, said T'Challa. Shields up, said Batman to the ship. Any suggestions on our next move? We go to Earth and my city, replied Batman. Which would be? Gotham, replied Batman. The space station fired a proton beam at the ship that was easily dealt with by the frontal shield. Batman gave the ship a new heading and the vessel turned its attention from the space station and went to the blue marble that was Earth. The top half of the planet stuck out like a head in the darkness of space. The space station carried on with the proton attacks that proved futile in the end. S.W.O.R.D is an alien police force from my universe, said T'Challa. That means there is no Justice League and we are on our own, said Batman. Except that my wife is still out there, said T'Challa. The ship passed through the sparse cloud cover and came upon an incomplete city. Cruise mode, said Batman. The ship leveled out. Panoramic view, said Batman. The ceiling and walls at the front of the bridge turned transparent. The new view showed a patchy landscape as large sections of the city were completely bare. It looks as though the process has stalled, said T'Challa. You're right, conceded Batman. So where are the people? In Hammer space, theoretically speaking. Care to explain? It is the basis of my shadow physics. Hammer space is where all matter including light are broken down and compressed. I believe that Thanos had a safe means of operating in Hammer space. The brothers must be in control of this Hammer space, said Batman. Our presence in this unfinished reality must have caught their attention by now. Do you have a means of getting them to cooperate? I'll think of something while we wait. And if they don't show up, then we have to find a way to get everyone out of Hammer space. Do you have knowledge of quantum physics? Asked T'Challa. Yes, replied Batman. Good. We should get started then on traveling to Hammer space. We need a laboratory. Any suggestions? Teleport us into the street. I recognize one of the city schools, said Batman. Several minutes later, the Black Panther and Batman were inside the silent halls of a high school. T'Challa noted that the foundation stone said that the school was funded by Wayne Enterprises. T'Challa remembered his time as a school teacher in Harlem, New York City. In the vision he saw a packed classroom with eager young faces glued to his every word. It was refreshing to T'Challa to recall such moments again. The two men found the science laboratory. T'Challa quickly drew a diagram on the whiteboard to illustrate his theories on the amalgamation process. We have two multiverses with almost similar geographies and different people. In a way it looks like two experiments running simultaneously side by side, said T'Challa. Now, space and time are fluid, without a barrier between the two multiverses they are moving into each other. That should be catastrophic, instead we are experiencing an intricate conjoining. Hammer space is being used as a holding station where matter, antimatter, memories, consciousness, and reality are broken down, made over and redeployed. Meaning that right now you and I are not on your Earth but a completely new one, said T'Challa. You mentioned that it resembles an experiment, said Batman as he looked over the diagrams. Do you believe that there is a creative force involved? It's possible. But you left out the brothers. How do they fit in? What are your thoughts? We should have a strategy to deal with the brothers. What do they look like? They are formless but can inhabit the bodies of others. Well, I have a technique that usually rids my mind and body of an invasion, said T'Challa. Me too, said Batman. Okay then. Now to get to the hammer space safely we'll need a portal, a vessel, a power source strong enough to get us there and protection from being torn apart, said T'Challa. We have Metron's chair and Darkseid's hyperdrive. The shields can be modified, said Batman. The duo returned to the ship and went to the engine room. T'Challa inspected the cylinder device that resembled a turbine. The engine was based on quantum fusion, which T'Challa was familiar with. It will do, said T'Challa. I failed to mention the mystical elements required for the portal. Like the Palmec symbols for interspace travel, said Batman. T'Challa smiled inside since the stranger was as knowledgeable as him. Yes, said T'Challa. I will have to carve them into the ship. With what? My sword, replied T'Challa. Is it enchanted? Asked Batman. No. It is technological, replied T'Challa. He felt as though he had given away a vital bit of information to Batman. I still have to be cautious, thought T'Challa. They tackled the Mobius chair next. T'Challa surgically cut through the tough metal skin with the sword. Underneath the skin was a smooth circuitry system. T'Challa took out his Kimoyo and scanned the Mobius. Batman looked on intently. I'm not reading any energy signatures, said T'Challa. It must be out of the element X that powers it, said Batman. That's a setback, said T'Challa. Still we can use the parts for the engine. I'll get the maintenance tools from the ship and then we can start, said Batman. Chapter 2 Batman landed the ship onto 6 city blocks. Then he and T'Challa returned to the engine room. T'Challa drew up the schematics of the device that they needed to construct from the engine to open the portal to Hammer Space. We'll reconfigure the ship's teleportation system, said T'Challa. I guessed that much, said Batman. Then he ordered the ship to release the maintenance androids. 7 androids appeared out the wall panels. They were 7 feet in height, tentacles spooled out of their hands. 3 yellow lights acted as eyes on their heads. Secretly, T'Challa attempted to connect wirelessly with the androids from his Kimoyo. He was successful and began to quietly instruct the machines. Let's get started, said Batman as he took two large tool boxes from a storage cabinet and opened them. T'Challa looked over the tools that were a mixture of conventional and strange. "By the way, what does your wife look like?" asked Batman. "She is 5 feet 9 inches tall, has long white, blue eyes, dark skin and was wearing black and gold uniform," replied T'Challa. "Her name is Ororo and code name Storm." Batman had a reflective look when he heard the name. "I've encountered her before when I went over to your universe," said Batman. "If I'm not mistaken, I think the team that she was on was called the X-Men." "Correct," said T'Challa and was slightly annoyed with himself that he was unaware that Batman came to his universe. "What happened between you and the X-Men?" "We fought. The Justice League came over to even out the odds," replied Batman. "Then we had a truce. You never returned since then." "No." For the next hour, T'Challa and Batman worked on opposite sides of the engine. T'Challa kept his senses locked on Batman to ensure that he knew his every movement. T'Challa didn't entirely trust the man. As a precaution, he programmed the androids to take action on Batman if necessary. All the while T'Challa thought about Ororo. Darkseid had returned to the source wall without her. What could that mean? Was she dead as Thanos presumed? And what did Darkseid need her for? Still, T'Challa continued to have faith that Ororo was alive somewhere. He wouldn't believe otherwise unless there was proof. "We have been through so much together, especially after Thanos stole our memories and we made it through the twists and turns," thought T'Challa. "It's almost like we are invincible. I guess that we need to think that way or else we'll lose hope," he continued. He pondered on the citizens of Wakanda and how they really felt about the constant sudden disappearances of their leaders. Eventually they may get fed up of it, thought T'Challa. He knew that Shuri and Umba would be all right for the time being. Their metals were also tested by the ordeal with Thanos and Raven. 3 hours passed and T'Challa barely spoke to Batman other than to ensure that they were progressing with the work. T'Challa was impressed by the level of Batman's engineering skills. There were equations that required on-the-spot solving and Batman did them with relative ease. T'Challa added that insight to his profile of Batman. Then a situation occurred that made T'Challa aware that Batman was a person who liked to do things his own way. The situation arose over the determination of the sinkhole point for the portal. The sinkhole was the depth at which the portal would open into another dimension. Batman disagreed with T'Challa's calculations on the matter. "We have to change it," said Batman. "There is nothing wrong with it," said T'Challa. "I'm telling you that it has to change based on my knowledge of Darkseid's technology. I have already accounted for the deviation," said T'Challa. "We will be smashed to bits if we follow your numbers," said Batman. "Any further adjustments will throw out the alignment," said T'Challa. "And my calculations say that we'll make it through safely." "Listen," said Batman in a take-charge tone. "The fate of the universes can't rest on your ego." "My ego," said T'Challa. "I've been building portals for years. I know what I'm doing." "I can't verify that, can I?" asked Batman aggressively. "Look, we are wasting time." "The calculations stay," said T'Challa. "I'm still changing it," said Batman. T'Challa had to keep his emotions in check. He knew that he was correct, but nothing he could say would change Batman's mind. There was no way the device could be tested safely without the creation of the portal. By then the ship would only have enough power for the shields. T'Challa even considered taking action on Batman to remove him, only there was a considerable amount of work to be done with a limited time window. "You can either leave the ship or work with me," said T'Challa. Batman made no response and T'Challa left. They worked without speaking to each other until the modified engine was ready. Then they powered it up and all hell broke out. Chapter 3 Shut it down, yelled Batman. No, said T'Challa. It is just adjusting to the transwarp fields. The ship vibrated uncontrollably. It's going to tear the ship apart, said Batman as he headed for the main switch. T'Challa held his hand firmly. We'll not get a second chance with the adjustments, said T'Challa. Batman's free hand came from underneath the cape and it jammed a device onto T'Challa's chest. T'Challa was certain that Batman didn't have the device on him when they had met. On closer inspection, T'Challa saw that the device was made from discarded parts of the engine. Batman must have constructed it during the time he was alone. A magnetic force dragged T'Challa away from Batman and carried him to the wall. He tried to pull himself free with no avail. I assumed that there was a degree of metal in your armor and the magnetic force will disrupt any attempts to teleport, said Batman. Then he turned to the switch. Batwing, shouted T'Challa for the androids to hear. The machines seized Batman with their tentacles and held him up in the air. I also devised a means of capturing you, said T'Challa. For what? Asked Batman. You're going to kill us. The ship rocked and it seemed as though a force squeezed on it. The ceiling crumpled slightly. T'Challa and Batman stared angrily at each other. One of them had to be wrong. The hull of the ship made a jarring noise. I told you, now it is too late, shouted Batman. Then the vibrations gradually subsided. Calm returned to the ship. You were saying, said T'Challa. I was saying that we don't know what the structural integrity of the ship is now from the damage done by the engine, said Batman. T'Challa had to concede that Batman had a point. We cannot continue like this, said Batman. Truce? Asked T'Challa. A truce then, said Batman. Now release me. Then I'll get the nullifier off of you. T'Challa considered if the gesture of goodwill was a trick. Still he had to relent. Release him, said T'Challa. The androids dropped Batman onto the floor. Then Batman went to T'Challa and removed the device. Chapter 4 Themyscira was just as Ororo remembered it. A tropical rainforest rose out of a lagoon on the east side. The forest stretched out until it reached the Amazon settlement in the north. The settlement was caught in a time capsule that portrayed ancient Greece. The houses and streets were rustic. The agora in the center was the settlement was built with thick white pillars. Ororo flew down to the agora. The place triggered memories that were buried deep into her subconscious. They were memories implanted from the false world that she now found herself in. She saw in her mind the Amazons as they filled the agora. They were a clan of female warriors ordained by gods. They lived for battle. Still Ororo remembered a peaceful life on the isolated island. She recalled baths in the cold springs in the mountains, the songs of birds and the beautiful sunsets where vivid colors were splashed across the sky. In this world she was raised as an adopted daughter of the Amazon Queen. Her parents had died at sea and the Queen had rescued her from the depths of the sea. Then her rivalry with the Queen's other daughter Diana started. It was rough. The sisters hated each other at times. Ororo brushed her white hair from out of her blue eyes as she returned to the present world. She looked at the heavens. How do I escape from this? Asked Ororo. She flew out of the agora on a gust of wind and traveled to the palace where Diana searched for others. Seeing Diana made Ororo happy. The ordeal in the false world had stirred a great deal of angry emotions in them which they were able to reconcile. As Wonder Woman, Ororo lived a virtuous life and had low expectations of the outside world. She met Diana at the palace gate. The Amazon princess had piercing blue eyes, long black hair and a slender figure. Anything? Asked Diana as she held her hair in place from the winds. It is only us on the island, replied Ororo. I checked the lower quarters and found nothing also, said Diana. We need to get to America and try to reach the Justice League through the station in Washington D.C. And what if we can't get onto them? Asked Ororo. We need a follow-up plan. I'm all ears, said Diana. There should be other artifacts like the World Tree in this reality. For instance, the cosmic cube that existed in my world should be able to help us. They were placed in specific areas and some of those locations may exist here, said Ororo. Okay, said Diana. Moments after, Ororo carried Diana into the sky on a cushion of warm air and then they shot across the earth on a magnetic pulse. They eventually came upon a city that they presumed was Washington, D.C., which was half-made. The usual landmarks like the White House, the Congress Building and the Washington Monument were absent. What do you make of it? Asked Diana. I don't detect anything odd on the elemental level, said Ororo. Do you see the League's building? Diana looked around and shook her head disappointedly. No, that leaves us with Plan B, said Ororo. Ororo felt a sharp pain in her chest and she lost control of her powers. Ororo, shouted Diana as they fell from the sky. The pain traveled all over Ororo's body and she was paralyzed by it. Unconsciously she knew the pain was due to the manipulation of the Earth's elemental fields. Sister, said Diana over the high whines. The pain went away and Ororo regained control. What was that? Asked Diana. We have to go south, said Ororo. There was a disturbance. Without waiting for a reply, Ororo darted into the direction. They traveled for a few minutes over an unfinished terrain. Then they arrived over a city. This is where Gotham should be, said Diana. Bruce. Who is Bruce? Asked Ororo. A friend, said Diana, more commonly known as Batman. I remember him, said Ororo. They flew around the city and saw the ship. That's the alien spaceship that attacked me and T'Challa, said Ororo. That's Darkseid's ship. He might be in there, said Diana. How do we counteract his beams? We can't, that's the problem. I'm sensing anomalies around the ship, said Ororo. She swooped down to the ship and it became apparent that it was damaged. Ororo and Diana slipped into the vessel through a small tear in the left side of the hull. Chapter 5. Ororo and Diana moved cautiously along a tunnel when a golden flash appeared in front of them. T'Challa and Batman came out of the flash. Darling, said T'Challa as he embraced her. My love, said Ororo. Ororo noticed that Batman was stoic as Diana held him. His response to her was lukewarm. For that reason, Ororo didn't like him a little. Where have you been? Asked T'Challa. With Diana, you remember her from the amalgamation. Wait, do you even have your memories back? Yes, replied T'Challa. He peeled off the mask and kissed her warmly on the lips. In that moment, Ororo was able to finally remember the first time they ever kissed and other intimate scenes. It was as though a hole was patched in her heart. Ahem, said Diana. Ah yes, said Ororo as she looked at her sister. T'Challa, I want to reintroduce you to Diana. Do you remember me? Asked Diana. Of course, replied T'Challa. You two know each other, said Batman. You sound stunned, said Diana. That's an understatement, said Batman. I was a mercenary for T'Challa, said Diana. T'Challa returned his attention to his wife. Where have you been? He asked. Ororo related the events with Darkseid. Then T'Challa told her what had happened with him. So have you two boys been getting along? Asked Diana. More or less, replied Batman and he glanced at T'Challa. Ororo felt no tension between the two men, but there seemed to have been a disagreement. "We were working on teleporting to the hammer space where the brothers will most likely be," explained T'Challa. "Where can Ororo and I help?" asked Diana. "Right now we are doing repairs, but you can still see the device," said T'Challa. T'Challa teleported the group to the engine room. After the women inspected the device, then the repairs were continued. In that time, Batman learned that Diana had lost her gifts. Even though Ororo acted professionally, a part of her wanted time to speak with T'Challa privately about their restored memories. With regards to Batman, she found him a bit too standoffish. Ororo sensed that he was still suspicious of her, although he acted cordially. She decided to speak with Diana on the issue when they were alone. "Is he always that skeptical of everything?" asked Ororo. "Yes. It's what makes him so effective," replied Diana. "We have been friends for a long time and I trust his instincts even though I may not agree with everything he does." "I think that he and T'Challa had a spat," said Ororo. "I feel the same way too," said Diana. "What about their theory that the amalgamation process has stalled?" "We will not know for sure unless we get to this hammer space," replied Diana. The quiet moment was broken when T'Challa teleported to them. "We're ready to teleport," said T'Challa. They went to the bridge. Batman had 2 holographic control panels in front of him. "We can operate the teleporter from here," said T'Challa. "Here goes," said Batman, and he touched an icon on the left panel. The ship jerked and the view screen turned black. T'Challa went over to the controls and checked a few of the numbers. "We are in hammer space," said T'Challa. "Panoramic view," said Batman, and the view screen widened. There was nothing visible. "Can we move forward?" asked Diana. "No. Propulsion was taken from the engine," replied T'Challa. "This is an immune verse. We just need to be patient for a while," said Batman. "So we're like a small fishing boat in an ocean waiting for something to come along," said Diana. Suddenly, an object bounced the ship so hard that it turned to the right. "What was that?" asked Ororo. "It must be the brothers," said Batman. "Whatever it was, it diminished the shields significantly," said T'Challa. The object struck the ship and turned it in the opposite direction. "I'm sorry that I used the fishing boat analogy," said Diana. Ororo went to the control panel. "T'Challa," she said. "We lost the shields," was all T'Challa was able to say as the ship was ripped into a billion pieces. Chapter 6 The entity called the Source reconstructed the ship that had entered into hammer space. The formless creature entered the ship and he sensed the humans and Metron on the bridge. He came upon 4 unconscious humans. He recognized Batman and Wonder Woman from the Justice League. The other 2 he surmised came from the other multiverse. He noticed the deceased Metron. He took them all as they would be needed for his plan for both multiverses. Story: The Best There Is. Chapter 1 Diana: I was in labor and all my strength was focused on giving birth to my baby. The doctor and nurses coaxed me. "Breathe, you are almost there," they said repeatedly. I yelled and screamed as the pain intensified. I closed my eyes and gave a final push, then I heard my baby crying. I collapsed from the fatigue, the warmth of joy swept over my body. Tears poured out of my eyes. My baby boy was born. I looked around the hospital room and in my heart I knew that it was not real. The cries from the baby and medical staff were not real. The emotions in my body were real at the time, but everything else was faked. I realized that the setting was a memory from my life in amalgamation. I had to wake up. I willed my mind to wake from the dream. In a fleeting moment I was sucked out of the illusion and into reality, if one could call it that. I awoke to a misty environment. I was alone. What is this? I murmured. I was on a hard surface that glowed in a medium white light. On closer inspection, the surface reminded me of a tree branch because of the shape. It was like the 1,000-year trees that grew in untouched forests. There were more branches all around me. They stretched out as far as the eye could see. The mist that greeted me was more an unknown vapor that made the environment hazy. I got up and looked behind me. The branch that I was on was laid out like a highway and I could not see the end of it. In an odd way I felt whole again. I flexed my fingers and felt the super strength that surged through me. I had the gifts of Wonder Woman once more. Now where are my friends? I asked. Batman, Ororo, T'Challa, I yelled. I waited for about a minute for a response and none came. Diana, your name means divine, said a modulated voice. Excuse me, I said, looked around and saw no one. The birth of your son was a divine moment. It was not real, I said. But you felt all the wonderful emotions that the moment created, said the voice. Do you have a form so that I see who I'm speaking with? Diana, I'm all around you. I looked at my surroundings in a new way. What is this? The mystery that Darkseid and others like him sought to unravel, replied the voice. Darkseid? Mystery? I asked. The only mystery that Darkseid was after was the anti-life equation. And where did the anti-life equation come from? Some believed that it came from the source, I replied and caught myself. You are the source. It is a rather erroneous term to describe me. I'm a tool for my master, said the voice. Hold on. I'm behind the source wall, I said. Yes, said the voice. Where are my friends? I'm not ready for them as yet because I needed to speak with you directly, replied the voice. On what? The birth of your son. As I said, it was fake. The world I lived in was not meant to be. Yet you loved your son and his father. I was taken aback by the statement. I had indeed loved them both. The father was Frank Castle. He was an ex-soldier. He was filled with sorrow when we first met and I came to love him. Why does that interest you? I asked. All life interests me because that is my purpose. When a child is born, a new consciousness is created. I connect to that consciousness. The more perceptive entities become aware of my presence and desire to meet me, which I don't want. You, Diana, experienced one of the greatest miracles in existence, far more powerful than you can imagine. What adds more weight to the experience is that you are not even a real person. I am a real person, I said. No, you were created from raw earth, not flesh and spirit. Still, you have been molded into a champion for life, the lives of people who are far realier than you, said the voice. How dare you? I am the reincarnation of an unborn baby whose mother was murdered by a man, the first such murder in history. I'm as real as anyone else, I said. I'm not demeaning you. I am aware that the Amazons are reincarnation of women murdered by men, said the voice. I was trying to draw your attention to how close to the original plan that you are, born of clay and pure. The original plan? I asked. This is what I will do. I shall merge the two multiverses into one and remove all the impurities that plagued the sentiences. Only you shall have knowledge of this. I will use you and your companions as test subjects in my experiment. Please don't merge the multiverses. It is unfair to play with lives like that, I said. It will appear unfair in the short term, but the benefits will be seen in the long term. I will recreate the best possible world for you. I beg you again. Put everything back to normal, I said, and then lost consciousness. Chapter 2. Bruce Wayne rolled over in the bed and came into contact with a woman, She was on her side with her back to him. Her hair was coal black. The shoulders were broad. He placed a hand on the woman's arm and the skin was soft and smooth. The woman stirred and turned to him. She had deep blue eyes, a slender face and a most perplexed look. "Good morning, sweetheart," said Bruce, and he kissed her tenderly on the forehead. The woman remained silent as her eyes went from him to the bed and then to the room. She was baffled by something. "Diana, what is wrong?" asked Bruce, and he moved over her. She pushed him off with all her strength. "No," she said. "Diana," said Bruce. "Just give me a minute," she said and held her forehead. "If you have a headache then you should have said so." Bruce got out of the bed and went to the medicine cabinet. He found his wife's behavior extremely weird. It was like she was unsure of her surroundings and even him. Everything was normal the night before, or was it? They ran into Bruce's ex-girlfriend Selena Kyle a few days ago at the mall. Diana had never met her before, but it seemed that the encounter was over and done with. He returned to Diana. She was playing with her wedding ring. He gave her the medicine and she accepted it. "How do you feel?" asked Bruce. "Better," she replied. He kissed her on the cheek. She felt cold to him. "Where is this coming from?" he pondered. He decided to lighten the mood. "Don't forget that we need to choose the movie for tonight. We have The Stormbot from Mars and Letter to the King. I think T'Challa and Aurora would like the first one." Diana's eyes lit up when she heard the names. "Yes, of course," said Diana easily. Bruce took the medicine back into the bathroom and by chance he glimpsed back. He saw as Diana got up and went to the window. The most that she would have seen in the African morning were the city buildings of the capital of the United States of Ethiopia. Several minutes later, Bruce and Diana had breakfast. He checked the news of the world from his digital newspaper. The Inca states were in new trade talks with the Orient. The Northern Bloc elected a new president. Scientists in Antarctica had discovered an unexplored part of the continent. Diana came over his shoulder as he read. That was strange since she didn't like to read the news. "May I?" she asked. He handed the newspaper to her and then he got ready for work. When he was half dressed, he realized that Diana was still in the kitchen. "Aren't you going to work?" he asked. "No," she responded quickly. "All right," said Bruce. In 10 minutes, he was out the door and headed for the office. Chapter 3. Diana looked over the photographs of her and Bruce. It reminded her too much of the relationship she had with Frank Castle. On that occasion she had sincerely loved Frank. But she regarded Bruce as a friend, not a lover. She had to compose herself in the bedroom earlier for fear that Bruce would have thought that she was insane. "I hate alternate realities," mumbled Diana. Then there were T'Challa and Aurora. Who were they in this reality? Then she found the answer in a group photo. A smiling Aurora had a mohawk hairstyle and she stood next to T'Challa. He was a powerfully built man like Bruce. "How can I fix this? First I have to know exactly what I am dealing with." Diana went to the laptop computer that was next to the sofa. She went onto the internet and searched for the history of the world. She learned that the Roman Empire never existed, Christopher Columbus never rediscovered the Americas, the Crusades didn't occur, and so too the World Wars. Instead, the Incas and the Aztecs traveled to Europe and made contact. Japan, China, and India formed the Eastern Alliance. Eventually people moved freely amongst the borders. Diana went over the vast information for the most of the day. Finally she became bored and then searched through hers and Bruce's things. She looked at the wedding ring at intervals. She thought about how she would react when Bruce wanted to make love. Would she tense up or act naturally to keep up the pretense? Diana came out of the closet and looked at her house. She was a wife. This was the best reality possible that was created for her. Really? She had a dozen other fantasies of the perfect world for her and none were like this. I can leave Bruce, said Diana. The plan seemed possible. She could break up with him and not have to live this lie. Where will she go afterwards? That would need time to figure out. I don't think so, said a man from behind her. Diana spun around and saw no one. You cannot see me. Show yourself, said Diana. Diana, you will stay with Bruce Wayne until death. No, why do you fight this world? There is no crime. There is no need for vigilantes and heroes. You can live out your life in peace with someone who loves you. I want to choose that person and not have him chosen for me, said Diana. Is everything in here perfect? No. There are a few quirks to balance things out. You disgust me. You will thank me in the end. You just need time to adjust. Never, said Diana. And why don't you just erase my memory? There was a pause. It's complicated. Diana's eyes squinted. What do you mean by that? She asked. The arrangement I made to shape the multiverses required that I keep one person with their real memories. Who did you make the arrangement with? I have revealed too much already. I will resist this sham of a world and my marriage. You made that point before. Well, I want to remind you of it. I'm willing to find a remedy for this problem. Do you have any suggestions? Diana leaned on the cabinet to think. I want to fight for my real world, said Diana. A contest? Yes. My friends and I will fight to get back the multiverses. If you lose, then will you comply with the world that has been given to you? Yes, replied Diana before she had a chance to think properly. Amusing. You want to return to an existence where pain and despair run rampant. Very well. I will return in 24 hours. Hopefully by that time you would have changed your mind. A few moments passed and Diana realized that she was alone again. Chapter 4. Aurora was a photographer like her father. He taught her everything about the art. She visited him and her mother regularly in Egypt. She was married to T'Challa, a software engineer. They met through mutual friends and had been married for 3 years. Those were the details that Diana slyly got from her conversation with the couple. She noticed Bruce sometimes glanced strangely at her, like he was aware of what she did. He had his arm around her shoulders as they sat in the sofa. T'Challa and Aurora were on the other side. This is a ridiculous movie, said Aurora. What is the name again? The Stormbot from Mars, answered Bruce. Then he took his arm from around Diana and took up the popcorn bowl. Honey, we have to get some more. Okay, said Diana. She followed him into the kitchen and he closed the door. Why are you acting so strange? He whispered. I'm not. Yes, you are. It started this morning, when I got home, and now here in front of our friends, said Bruce in a low voice. His reaction caught Diana off guard. He was not the goddamn Batman but an ordinary man from a simple background. The watered-down version displeased her. Bruce lacked the invigoration and depth that she was accustomed to. I'm sorry, said Diana. It's just been a weird day. He kissed her and she generated as much feeling as possible when she returned the kiss. They returned to the living room. You missed the best part, said Aurora. At least Aurora was still lively, thought Diana. T'Challa and Aurora stayed a bit after the movie and then left. That meant that Diana had one more hurdle to cross, sleeping with Bruce. They cleaned up and got ready for bed. Diana lay down first and she felt awkward waiting for Bruce. She reluctantly remembered Frank Castle. Stop it, she thought. A bare-chested Bruce came and slipped into the bed. Do you still have the headache? He asked. Kind of, replied Diana. Okay, he said and turned off the lights. Then he turned to his side and went to sleep. Diana breathed a sigh of relief. The next day Diana took another day off from work. She went into the heart of Central City. There was a high degree of multiculturalism as people of all walks of life moved about the city. Was it selfish of her to want the world back as it was? She went to the park to think about it more clearly. She weighed up the pros and cons. She concluded that the people deserved their real lives. As the evening settled in, the voice came to her. No one else in the busy park heard it. Have you decided? Yes, replied Diana. I will fight. Are you speaking from your interest or for the people who had far worse lives before? I have considered that, said Diana. It goes both ways. Look at Bruce, he is a weakling compared to the man I knew before. He was a driven man, mean at times, still his heart was in the right place. There is no need for such a person here. Don't you see that you have broken him? When I look into his eyes, I can see that there's something missing in his soul, said Diana. Then you will have your challenge. Chapter 5. The last memory that Aurora had was being on the ship in Hammer space. Presently she woke up in a dim desert. T'Challa, Diana, and Batman were also waking. Aurora's mind automatically plugged into the elemental forces. Where is Metron? Asked Aurora while she looked about. I have to explain, said Diana, and then she told them what happened. You did the right thing, said Batman. I agree, said Aurora and held Diana's shoulder. Aurora sensed an intrusion into the environment. Darkseid appeared next to the group. He had his hands behind his back in a causal manner. He looked at them passively. Then he spoke. Darkseid shall be your first challenge. If you survive, then you will have only one more, said the entity that was in control of Darkseid. It begins now. Aurora reacted as fast as she could and supercooled the air around Darkseid, which left him encased in ice. T'Challa, his eyes, shouted Aurora. T'Challa teleported in front of Darkseid's face and slashed his eyes. Darkseid broke free and he held his eyes. Then he flew into the sky before T'Challa could cut him again. We only took out the Omega beams, said Batman. He has telepathy and telekinesis along with the speed and strength of a god. 2 energy beams shot down from the sky and they scattered the group. You forgot to mention that he can channel energy through his hands, said Diana. Aurora ignored the comments and concentrated on Darkseid's movements. She had failed in her previous attempts to destroy him outright. I'll have to do it piece by piece. First I have to nullify his telepathy with a blanket of electrical current around us. Then I'll use the magnetic waves to bring him down, thought Aurora. Moments later, Darkseid plummeted from the sky and he slammed in the soft earth. I'll distract him with a pulse to the brain before he can summon his telekinesis. Darkseid roared. Diana lassos him, said Aurora. Diana pulled the golden lasso from a pouch on her belt. The magical lasso grew a bit and Diana flew to Darkseid. She flung the lasso around his body and it tightened. Diana landed and pulled on the lasso to intensify the hold. Still Darkseid slowly rose and Batman ran to help Diana with pulling the lasso. They brought Darkseid down on his side. T'Challa, bury the sword in him. We'll let it explode, said Aurora. T'Challa rushed into Darkseid and sent the sword through his chest. Then T'Challa told the computers on the hill to release the blade. The dark force energy fizzed as it was released from its bonds and it became unstable. The computers turned into two gold orbs that circled T'Challa's head. "Diana, release him and get out of there," shouted Ororo. Ororo created individual gusts that took her friends into the sky while she did the same. Seconds later, Darkseid exploded. Ororo lowered everyone back onto the ground and they settled around the crater that was once Darkseid. "One down," said Batman. "Let's be ready for the second." "I have a guess on who that might be," said T'Challa. Ororo felt another twitch in the environment and then Yuga Khan appeared. Chapter 6 Batman, do you know anything about him? Asked T'Challa. "There are rumors that he can absorb planetary energy and life forces of individuals," replied Batman. "Almost like Galactus," said T'Challa reflectively. "Computers," he whispered and gave them coordinates. The group was teleported to the horizon. "This will give us time to come up with a plan." T'Challa was interrupted by Yuga Khan's appearance. "Computers again," said T'Challa. The group was transported the same distance but in another direction. They came upon Yuga Khan in the new location. "He hopped along when we entered hypertime and overtook us," said the computers. "Concede victory now," said the mind-controlled Yuga Khan. "No," said Diana. T'Challa's body weakened as his life force was funneled out of him. Ororo tried to supercool the air around Yuga Khan. He emitted an energy wave that stopped her. T'Challa and the others fell. "Concede," said Yuga Khan. "No," said T'Challa. T'Challa was on the verge of losing consciousness when his life force returned. "The Creator has intervened on your behalf since you are willing to die," said Yuga Khan. "The multiverses shall be restored." Batman glanced at T'Challa knowingly when the Creator was mentioned. T'Challa looked at Ororo. She held her head and got up. "We won," said Ororo. "Just like that?" asked Batman of Yuga Khan. "I was given a chance to change things, which have not worked out," said Yuga Khan. "What's to prevent the multiverses from merging again?" asked T'Challa. "That shall be handled," replied Yuga Khan. "You will be returned to your respective multiverses." "I want to see the multiverses separated first," said Batman, "with my own eyes." "Done," said Yuga Khan. Gotham City. The group was teleported to the darkened rooftop of an apartment building. A thin moon was above the city. The blare of a police siren came from the street below, followed by gunshots. "This is the real Gotham, all right, I can smell it," said Batman, and he jumped off the roof. His spread cape filled up with the wind and became sturdier. He glided down to the shootout. T'Challa also smelt the grime from the city. He went to the edge of the roof and Diana held him. "Let Batman do it alone," said Diana. "Then we should be heading back," said Ororo. "I wish that we had more time to spend with each other," said Diana. "So do I," said T'Challa. They hugged each other. Then Yuga Khan took Black Panther and Storm away.